couple of the things that we missed that were in the dreams that happened just before this episode, before that segment, are also kind of interesting to look at. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about what else was in the episode. This was the episode of Lost with the most overt references to Christianity, and it did spark a lot of discussion online. I learned, for example, from an online art historian fan, that the scene of the baptism in Charlie's dream echoes a 15th century painting by Andrea del Verrocchio. And the idea about that echoing appears in a number of fan blogs and forums, too. This is from SledgeWeb's Lost Stuff, online as lost.qubit.net, and occasionally it showed up also as links in other blogs. And some, like Christian media critic David Buckner, extolled the program's embrace of what he believed was a Christian message, but others weren't so sure. As one self-described non-Christian wrote in response to Buckner's online post, he wrote, "I'm sorry, but if this show turns out to revolve around one particular religious belief, I may have to stop watching. I might have to stop corresponding with you, David, if this is going to ruin Lost for me. If it's all about sin and redemption, it was a long road to nowhere, in my opinion." On another online forum, a self-avowed newbie confesses that her knowledge of Christianity is primarily informed by Jesus Christ Superstar and the Da Vinci Code. After this episode, she puts forward the theory that the island may be an allegory for the New Testament, with Jack cast as Jesus and Kate as Mary Magdalene, and so forth. One person responds to her post generously saying, "Although I think that theory is really interesting, I highly doubt that's where the show is going," noting the many threads in the program that seem unrelated to Christianity. The listening station with the men speaking Portuguese, the utopian society, the possibility of genetic mutation. Another agrees with the second poster, noting that you can easily integrate many religious or cultural beliefs into Lost. That's what made this such a great show. This example illustrates that it was not simply the possibility of Christian reference that were the problem, but the way in which such reference could be interpreted with a specific agenda in mind that was the problem. The perceived agenda was definitely a problem for some. Shortly after this episode, a forum on internet infidels was started titled, "Anyone else mildly pissed off at the overemphasis of religion on Lost?" In reply to one online contributor's question, "Why did religion have to creep in and screw this show up?" One person replied diplomatically, "It didn't bother me. A lot of people are Christian. It would make sense that you'd have at least a few Christians who do not want the baby baptized on the island. Besides, consider that the Christian who did the baptism was a murderer and a drug runner." I have no doubt that plenty of Christians were pissed off about how their religion was portrayed in Lost. Another blogger added, "I was fine with Rose being religious and Echo being religious, but converting Claire rubs me the wrong way." This prompted another measured response. "I'm waiting to see where they go with it before I decide whether or not to get annoyed. It's true that they've had much in the way of biblical allusions and religious symbolism so far, but that doesn't automatically mean that the show is promoting religion. Remember, the baptism thing was Echo's interpretation of Charlie's vision. Echo is a religious guy, so he took the save my baby to mean save in the religious sense. For example, the cleansing of sin and eternal salvation. Charlie was raised in the Catholic faith, so it's not surprising his vision would be cloaked in religious imagery." Another blogger agreed, "The religious stuff doesn't bother me as long as it's interesting. It's a fictional show. If it gets boring, then we have another problem." Another noted, "I don't feel any fundy overtones from this show. There are none of the standard fundy themes that I would normally pick up on." Internet Infidels was one of the few places online, however, that also offered a contradictory view on the depictions of Rose and Echo, as one person commented on the program's racial stereotyping, that Rose is your stereotypical black Christian woman is disappointing, and that Lost seems to generally do a good job of avoiding stereotypes. In a different forum related to Lost.com, online contributors were frustrated that some fans seemed to want to dismiss the Christian dimensions of the series, not because they themselves were believers, but they felt that the Christian imagery played such an obvious role in the series. Late in the second season, one person wrote, "Absolutely equal to the scientific portion of the show is the faith aspect. No one's saying you have to believe in religion, just understand how it may correlate to the show's scientific principles. Before I get bombarded with the personal questions of am I religious? That's not my effing," she writes, "point. I write to allow a concept simply for a better understanding of this show. Sorry for being so hostile, but the messages written by some people lately have been so condescending to believers, I think it's time to fire back in another post." Another person responded in agreement, "There's no way religion or its baby brother psychotherapy aren't important here. What we need is a clear-minded discussion of the role of religion in Lost. That's part of the beauty of the show, and the reason it sucks the more intelligent of us in." Lost fans clearly like to think of themselves as intelligent. Few of these fans, however, seem to notice the lack of Jews in the program, at least until Lilit Marcus posted an article on BeliefNet.com to that effect early in the 3rd season. She writes, "I'm not asking for a whole subgroup on the island, just some representation." She adds, tongue-in-cheek, "Slap a high necklace on someone. Give one of the background characters a yarmulke and make sure the audience notices." By the end of the episode, there will be at least 8 websites devoted to what that yarmulke might mean and the role it plays in the mythology of the show. But by the 3rd season, another religious system had emerged into prominence in the series, and that was the Eastern philosophies of Buddhism and Hinduism. The Dharma Initiative logos, which appear in the hatch and on the food drops the island receives, feature a wheel of destiny from the I Ching. Dharma is a Sanskrit word meaning the way of higher truths. The idea of being lost, as one commentator in a Buddhist magazine argued, is central to the Buddhist concept of enlightenment. He writes, "We must be willing to get lost, to cast off the moorings of what we think or think we know." And as the series continues to lead its audience into its mysteries, it will continue to enable I missed this part, but it will enable people to have a meditative experience. But do viewers get this? As one fan wrote midway into the 3rd season of Lost, "Several of the sayings seem to have a Buddhist flavor. Didn't one say something like, 'We all cause our own problems'?" Another noted at the end of the 3rd season that he'd gotten interested in the Dharma thing and had looked it up. These kinds of things were indicative of a general message of "you lost me" that emerged in all kinds of fan conversations in the 3rd season. And as the 3rd season progressed, we saw less indication that Dharma was going to be a significant part of the storyline. So we found some clues we find clues when we look at these online conversations about how the way that Christianity is discussed has a lot to do with how it's received. But on the other hand, when people attempt to cut Christianity out of the picture, when it seems very much woven into the fabric of the story, others will object. There seems to be a place for Christianity, these audience members seem to say, but it's a place of humility and a place of respect for Christianity's role in American culture. Too much has happened in the world to let a story about baptism go uncritiqued, these contributors seem to say. And even the story's creators seem to have backed away from easily misinterpreted Christian imagery, perhaps after the online conversations demonstrated the possibilities for misreading their intentions. But stepping back, these programs also need to be seen in light of larger contexts of audience anxieties. Lost is a perspectival narrative. It challenges us to ask questions about what we think we know. "We're the good guys," says Ben. Do we as an audience believe him? Who do we trust? Part of the appeal, as has been noted earlier in this conference, is in the hope that these questions will be answered for us. And this kind of knowledge that